I mentioned earlier that I'll use this as an example because I was there at the beginning of the GSM revolution in 2001. And if you look at South Africa, they, I think, started GSM around 1993. So they had like an 8-year head start on Nigeria. However, when we started, who are the main builders of our GSM industry here? The South Africans, which meant that in 7-8 years, they were able to build that capacity. In the 10 years since we started, can we really say that we made any progress in Nigeria? I think that's a good question, because I was part of it at the beginning, and I look back now and it's regrets to realize that we have not taken advantage of what we have. Of all these 4 major countries, GSM companies, only one of them is Nigeria owned. See, and the issue is that it's very simple. If I was South African born, and if I was Indian born, I think India first. I think South Africa first. I don't make my investments in Nigeria. It's only natural. So we need to look at how we can change that going forward. If you look at some of these companies, the amount of dividends that they remit on a regular basis compared to how much tax they are paying, there is no correlation whatsoever. And we're the ones that are losing every step of the way. This just shows globally, there's 400 trillion in 2015 in terms of IT goods and services across the world. And we're going to be hitting about 350 trillion mark in 2015. A huge opportunity, if you ask me. If you also disaggregate the market for Middle East and Africa, it's still a huge amount of money. That's $8 billion of revenues. But how much of that is coming to Nigeria? I could not get the results for Nigeria specifically, but this gives you an idea that if Nigeria can really do well, you can imagine how much of that money will come. So we have a big market that exists in the region, but are we really ready to be able to take advantage of it? Which is what this slide is saying. Are we really ready? Our industry is not competitive. The regulatory and legal environment is not very friendly. Our pool of skilled people is not much. And I'll also show you some slides to prove that. Infrastructure is weak. Everywhere you look at, basic power, we still are having challenges. Tax is an issue. Multiple taxation doesn't really encourage people to invest. Multiple government agencies, overlapping functions. I don't know what we're doing with NIC COMSA, for instance. I don't understand it. Huge capital flight. Of course, if your major companies are being controlled by non-Nigerians, this is what's going to happen. It's a no-brainer. Now let's just look at some of these countries and what they've done. I think the key thing here, I keep saying, and I'll talk about that later, is education. 490 universities in India, 20,000 colleges, largest in the world. GDP growth is in the stratosphere, as you can see. They are improving in terms of the corruption index, so they are fixing their problems gradually. In terms of the educational system, they are ranked very highly as well. And they've done a lot to help their industries. There's government policy, there is tax holidays for R&D, they have a venture capital fund, they look at innovators and they help them along the way to be able to ensure that they come up with the next big thing. 7 billion for IT education program in India, 7 billion in 2009. And the results show it. Without going through all that, I think the main one you want to see is the ICT studies export as a percentage of total studies export in that country. It's 3%. And if you look at some of the largest corporations today, Citibank and I believe it's PepsiCo. The people that are at the helm of Indian extraction. The lady PepsiCo, is it Coke or PepsiCo? I think it's one of them. PepsiCo, exactly. And then the gentleman in Citibank. It is not by chance that this is happening. It is orchestrated. It is investments made over the years that is taking them serious results. Brazil. I was in Brazil for a week in May. I spent some time with the President Central Bank, their IT department. They're in complete control of their destinies. That's what I can say. They've built local capacity. They are very strong. You go to a Cisco, and the guys that are driving it are Brazilians. The IT department, everything through and through, they do themselves. They don't even use SAP or they develop something on their own. So there's a lot that we can learn from them. Literacy rate is 86%. In the past 12 years, since 1998, they have moved 30 million people from being poor to the middle class. And that is amazing. Again, incentives and tax breaks to boost technology. The president of an IT association has a seat on Brazil's Economic Development Council. Does the Minister of ICT in Nigeria ever have a seat? Is it that committee? That's Okonewa as chair. Those are the things that we... Is she? She is. She's not. Okay. So in a nutshell, I mean, these are things that help. Number of college graduates in IT careers, 53,000 2013. More and more and more. I can go on and on. Let's look at South Africa, our neighbors down south. You don't go through a lot of hassle if you want to make investments in that country. They don't stand in your way. They have grants that help you in developing your initiatives. It is one of the finest countries, in terms of infrastructure. About 8% of their graduates are in IT and technology-related disciplines. In terms of ease of doing business, they are way up there. And it's one of the top 30 preferred destinations for outsourcing in the world. The US is a leader in innovation. And again, it's not by happenstance. What they've done is build clusters of innovation. The biggest one being Silicon Valley. I went for a course there once, just out of curiosity. I went to the University of California, Berkeley, spent a week there. A course on venture capital and private equity. I just wanted to learn a little bit out of it. And it just opened it up for me as to how this whole Silicon Valley thing is orchestrated. The government invests so much in the schools around there. They don't tell you, but that's what they do. A lot of billions go to those schools. The students, the lecturers, the industry, they all work together in developing the new ideas. And so it's a virtuous cycle that keeps happening. They have it in the Texas area, around UT Austin as well. And they have the second largest one is in the New England, in Boston area. Again, the same cycle through the big universities there, MIT, Harvard, and the rest of them. So a lot of things that you see is not happening just because people are, America tell you that they are very independent and they don't depend on government and all that. At the end of the day, the government derives what happens. All the new technologies are driven directly or indirectly by government spending. R&D, basically, this slide shows that we are nowhere to be found. We're not even up to 0.1%. That's why we're not appearing in this graph in terms of what we're doing in terms of R&D. Some of the countries I mentioned, you can see they spend about 1% GDP on R&D. Even Africa as a whole, in terms of the average, is about 0.4%. Nigeria is 0.0000. Quickly, I mentioned this earlier, but just a comparative of those 4 countries in terms of service exports. So you can see India is way, way, way up there. And Nigeria compared to the rest is still low. And if you look at the actual GDPs of this country, then it's even much, much lower. This is regarding the imports of goods. Nigeria is increasing, India has increased slightly, Brazil is reducing, South Africa is reducing. In other words, they're depending less and less and less on the importation of ICT goods. Here is about exports. Again, we're not showing up at all compared to the other countries. This just looks at, I think, 13 leading preferred outsourcing locations. And it uses categories like language, the support of government, the labor pool, the quality of labor pool, infrastructure, educational system, the cost of doing business, the political environment, the cultural compatibility, globalization, legal maturity, and on and on and on. And we're not even in the top 30. This is just for the 13 top countries. Let me talk about Vision 2020. Right, what are the lessons from all these countries? The governments, they play a critical role. The focus on education is fundamental. They have long-term plans. Long-term plans, in harnessing and developing technology education. Substantial investment in research and development. Political environment is stable. Skilled labor, strong global alliances. If you look at that very well, everything points to education, and even more education. This comes up once in a while when I'm discussing with my friends. I just want to look at banking and telcos. Sometimes you discuss whether or not it matters if Nigerians are majority shareholders in companies or if they are foreign owned. And the results are mixed, really. If you look at the current banking crisis, the 3 foreign owned companies, banks, came up unscathed, which meant that they're doing something right. All the banks that were in problem are Nigerian banks. But then GDP is an example of the proof that, hey, we can do it. We can do it. All you need to do is get the right people to be in the right places. And that's important. The right people in the right places, and we can do it. You look at telcos. As I said earlier, if I were Indian and I want Airtel, I'll be thinking Bangalore all the time. It's really natural. And if I were MTN too, it's about how can South Africa get the best out of it. Globe is the only investment here. Globe may not be today a paragon of corporate governance. But remember, any investment that Globe makes is likely to benefit this Nigeria, the next generation for the next 25 years. They will think about Nigeria first. They may not be the best company today, but they need to be supported one way or the other. Now, I'm moving close to the end. I'm rushing very quickly. I'll talk about education last, but it's actually the first thing and probably the only thing. Everything else is secondary to education, but I'll address that last. The Minister of ICT, as I said, should actually be part of that economic team, so that the perspective can be brought to that team as to how important ICT is. I talked about the fact that in the UK, they call it pangos, I believe. We have too many of them, and a lot of them are not really achieving the aims. So they need to be streamlined one way or the other. If you look at many major ICT companies, the OEMs, the IBMs, HPs, Microsoft, and the rest of them, how much do we spend in buying their products? How much, or what proportion of what we have spent is actually being reinvested in Nigeria? I think there needs to be a policy that sets a certain standard, which I think should be at least 10%. Either it's in training or in developing people. If you earn $10 million, you must bring back $1 billion. And you need to show us what you're doing with it. And we need to find a way to develop the best model. I don't have the answers. And I'm sure that discussions with all of you over time probably lead us into coming up with better solutions. Before I say my final word, I also want to indicate that, you know, it's easy for you to look at these statistics and just say, you know, maybe I should start thinking about taking my children abroad. This country is there. Just some examples. Somebody said that if in 1950, somebody has predicted that Japan and Germany will be, by 2000, 50 years later, the second and third economies in the world, that they'll have been laughed at. You understand? Based on where they were at that time. Nigeria today, like the Soviet Union and China, many years ago, very low capital incomes, you know, but the sheer sizes have made them economic powers, and they've been able to build on that and become who they are today. I mentioned earlier about Brazil, how they moved people out of poverty in large numbers in just 12, 13 years. And in the 1970s, China was in chaos. Nobody really cared about China. Today, they're the number one economy. Again, I went to China once. I was in Shenzhen, which is across the water from Hong Kong. And my guide was telling me the history of Shenzhen. He said that 30 years before that time, which was 2 years ago, 4 years ago, that it was non-existent. Shenzhen. Now, because of the vision of a leader, it is the technology hub of China. And it's such an amazing place if you go there today. Before I finish, I just want to say some final words. Excuse me. I mentioned earlier that I will leave education to the very end because I believe it's the key. It's probably the only thing that we must start addressing if we must move away from this abject statistics that I've shown you. Right. Education is the key. I read an article not too long ago about a British man who went to the hinterlands in Africa. I was following the progress of some kids. He described some of them in his article. They have to travel 5 miles to get to school. Some of them are so young that because they don't have parents, he had to come back and take care of his daughter, of his sister, younger sister. And yes, he was scoring A's. So he gave examples of many people like that they were in very difficult circumstances, yet they were doing very well in school. So his conclusion is that God, in His infinite mercies, have spread talent across the world, and that talent is universal. He also said one thing, that the difference in countries is how well they have harnessed those talents for the benefit of their citizens. Even though talent is universal, but remember the parable of the talents in the Bible. Everybody has it, some in large measure, some in small measure. But what really matters is how well do you use it. Do you bury it as we're doing here, or do you use it, to make things better? The issue of long-term planning and focus are very important. For people who follow soccer, and I'm sure a lot of the men here do, we marvel when we see the Spanish team play and how well they do it. But again, that didn't happen by chance. In the UK, they have, I'm not sure of the number, I'll say, I use X. Number of UEFA approved coaches. Coaches that have UEFA licenses. They have X number. Spain has 3X of that number. Whereas 80% of the eggs in the UK, they are focused on the big leagues, the top leagues, top two leagues, the Championship and the Premiership. Most of the 3 eggs, again, 80% of the eggs in Britain, top leagues. A large percentage of the 3 eggs in Spain, the lower leagues. People age 6, age 7, age 8. So these are UEFA approved coaches. These are very good coaches, very good people. But they start teaching people from you. So by the time as a Spanish boy, soccer player, you're 13, you already have that football brain in you. And it shows. It's planning. And if you remember in 1999, we had the Youth Soccer World Cup on that training. Xavi was number 8 in the Spanish team that won 4-0. We had Ronaldinho here. We had a lot of people here that I mentioned. Robbie Keane was here. Several of them. They've gone to attain great heights. Our best player was Julius Agaboa. You know, he shouldn't have been in that team because he was too old for that team. I heard a rumor that even his teammates call him Bros. So we lost an opportunity of getting the right people and training them right to become good at what they do. So to compete on the world stage, we must find a way to harness our best talent. Once upon a time in this country, there used to be 5 secondary schools, very good secondary schools. King's College, Ayoh, a lot of good federal government colleges. Everything has been watered down. If you look at the slide on the US clusters of innovation, I'll just bring it up. You know, these schools, MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, they do not exist in isolation. They have feeder schools into them. The enrollments every year has about 40 to 60% from studying schools around them. MIT, Harvard, you have the Felix Exeter, the Felix Roundabout, the Miltons. Yale has the Teddys and the Lawrencevilles, and so on and so on. So by the time you come out from those schools, you're already at a very high level. So by the time you come in there, they are the best of the best. Look at the profile of people in the Congress in the United States. I remember during the Reagan administration, I went to the USIS to ask for some information, and I was sitting down waiting in the lobby, and I was flipping through some of the cards there. Each of the cards contains a bio of every member of the Reagan administration. And I was seeing people with PhDs way before I was born. I saw fantastic people who they can only make good decisions because of their backgrounds. But back to what we must do. We must learn from some of the top institutions abroad, like the Ivy Leagues and the rest of them, because they built centuries of reputation. They don't want to do anything to lose it. So I think the first thing for us is find a way to choose leaders of reputation. People that, regardless of what happens, they are going to take the right decisions because they don't want their reputation to be soiled. And we have some people here. Another thing that we must do, very political, I don't have the solution, is that geography in Nigeria should become history. We think too much about state of origin, rather than the person's talents and the person's abilities. There is no country in the world that has succeeded that look at those indices. If you're not good, I'm sorry you're not. We have to choose somebody else. But that's not the story. Very recently, there was the case of a Minister of Communications. And if you check his resume, his claim to fame was that he used to be the local government chairman.
And we can continue. Hello?
I think someone doesn't like that comment.
So in conclusion, basically, I think
education has to be the government priority. We have to find a way to go back to what used to work and what has worked in other places and use that to move us forward. Unless we do that, we'll still be stronger. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. I first want to say, please give John another round of applause. I think that was IVC.